Hello and welcome to the course Creating Stylized 3D Characters in Blender. In this course, we will create this beautiful character you see on the screen, and along the way, you will learn all the essential techniques, tools, and knowledge to create any characters from scratch. And during this video, we will go over the course content, and you will also learn about the unique features of this course, which makes it the right choice for you. Since this course is focused specifically on character creation, we will be moving a bit faster through general Blender basics. That's why this course is best suited for learners with basic experience in Blender. Now, let's explore what you will be learning here. This course follows the complete character creation pipeline, with each essential step explained in its own chapter. We will start things off by finding reference images and set them up for best viewing. Having a reference is a crucial and logical first step in any creative project because it helps you form a clear idea of what you're going to make. After we set up our reference images, we dive into sculpting. This is probably the most fundamental step in character creation. Here, we will learn the essential tools and sculpting features of Blender, and we will sculpt our character. The next step is retopology. This is where we create a clean, organized, and optimized mesh, essential for both animation and game development. Once the mesh is clean, we move to UV unwrapping. You will learn all the essential tools to create and edit the UVs in Blender and unwrap your 3D character properly. The next step is creating textures and materials, and in this step, we will learn how to paint textures by hand and also by baking. We will also learn to sculpt small details using Multi-Res Modifier and bake those details onto an image texture. By the end of this chapter, you will have all textures and materials ready for your character. Finally, we will move to presentation. You will learn how to rig and pose your character, create a nice scene, set up the lighting, and produce a final render. Now, although we will create a stylized character in this course, the overall process you will learn, from sculpting to texturing to rendering, is exactly the same for realistic characters. So, once you understand all these techniques, you can easily apply them to create realistic characters with only a difference in artistic approach. And now, we will talk about some unique advantages of this course which makes it really effective. Unlike most courses, every lesson in this course includes clear timestamps, which means you will see exactly what you are learning in each lesson and exactly when you will learn them during the video. Also, the timestamps allow you to find any topic in the lesson much easier if you ever need a quick refresher. Secondly, and probably more importantly, each and every lesson in this course ends with either quick questions or a challenge section. These will help you reflect on what you have learned, strengthen your understanding, and encourage you to practice what you have learned. And finally, there are no time lapses in this course. Everything is shown in real time. Trust me, most character creation courses contains lots of time-lapse videos, which frustrates any learner, especially the beginners. And of course, in our course, every video is carefully edited for pacing, and you will get the full process without wasting much time. Well, these are the features that most students love, and we've added them to make your learning experience as effective as possible. So, if you're serious about creating your own 3D characters for games or animation, this is the complete pipeline you need. Jump right in, and I'll see you inside the course. In this video, we're going to download and install Blender. In order to download Blender, go to blender.org/download. And on this page, you can click on this blue button and download Blender. If you need any other version for other operating systems, you can see them here. If you want to download any future version, experimental version, you can come here and download. If you need any previous versions, you can click on this previous versions and hit on this download any Blender button, and you can see previous versions of Blender. Once you have downloaded, you can double click or right click and install the program. The 3D character creation process follows a clear pipeline or some general steps. And at this point, I'd like to mention that these steps are pretty much universal, which means they are necessary to create any character, whether it's a stylized or realistic. So the first step is to have a general picture of what you want to create. For that, you can draw your own concept art, or you can find reference images from different resources like online, or you can use AI tools to generate some reference images. From those reference images, you normally get two things. First, you get inspiration, some ideas, right? And second, you learn from them. And we're going to just get some reference images and get inspiration and learning from them. But in a studio environment, normally you develop the concept design first. The second step is sculpting, and I think this is one of the most creative part of character creation. Sometimes you also add some poly modeling to this step, and sculpting allows us to be very flexible to create shapes which would have been impossible with just poly modeling, and it gives us a lot of creative freedom. And once we have a nice sculpt, it's time to simplify it, which means creating a lower poly version, optimized version of the mesh, which almost exactly resembles the original sculpt. Creating that simplified lower poly mesh is called retopology. Retopologizing the sculpted mesh is extremely important, since that kind of mesh has millions of polygons and not very compatible with texturing and almost impossible to animate. And it's not good for games, for example. Once we have the simplified mesh, we can now move on to the next step, which is UV unwrapping. UV unwrapping is creating the UV maps of the model, which allows us to project textures onto the model with a lot of flexibility. And after we simplify our mesh and create UV maps, it's time to create materials and textures. Normally at this stage, we paint the textures by hand for best result. Of course, you can create materials just using Blender's material nodes, but painting allows us to be a lot more creative. So once we create the textures and apply the materials, it's time for presentation. You can't simply render or take a screenshot of your character in a random pose in a random environment, right? Because you want to add this project to your own portfolio, and you want to showcase your skills, right, with this project. That's why it's important to pose your character in a natural pose. Then you can create some nice background, light your scene, bring in some cameras, and take a great final render. And that's it, you have your character ready to showcase to others. Now, although these steps are the most important ones and they're universal, there might be some other things you need to do between these steps. And it depends on the style of your character and what you want to add to it. For example, you can directly model the clothes of your character without sculpting them first. You can use particles for the hair of your character without sculpting it, right? So the actual steps that you take to create your own unique character might be slightly different, but normally you never skip one of these universal steps. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about. Now it's time for quick questions. We have very simple questions for this lesson. The first question is obvious. Do you remember all the steps now? Well, I think you don't remember, and good news is you don't have to, because you will come back to the steps a lot during the course, and you can always come back to this lesson if you need a little refresher. The second question, why do we need to simplify the sculpted character mesh? That was an easy question, I think. We need to simplify this sculpted mesh because sculpting creates millions of polygons and it's not optimal to animate that or to texture it. That's why we need to simplify, and the process is called retopology. So that was all for this lesson. See you in the next one. In this lesson, we're going to talk about reference images, where to get them, how to use them, etc. Well, reference image is an image of something that you're going to make. In our case, we're going to create a stylized character, so we need to collect images for all sorts of different types of stylized characters, images for human body and different parts of the body like arms, hands, legs, feet, the face, ears, etc. Yeah, that's why I have collected a lot of images here. You will have all of them available for you in a zip folder, so please download them. But you can find more reference images on your own. Just go to Google and write stylized characters, go to Pinterest, go to Instagram, go to ArtStation. And these days we have AI tools, and actually I use Gemini to generate many reference images. So find a zip folder called reference images and download it. Now, once you have all the reference images that you want, it's time to think about how to view them. And luckily, we have a really nice program called PureRef, and it's free. So I recommend using it for viewing reference images on your computer. So in order to get that, go to pureref.com. You can see how it's written, pureref.com/download, and you'll be on this page. It will automatically detect your operating system, and actually you can donate, but if you want it for free, you can come here for custom amount and write 0, and it will be free and you can download it. Once you have downloaded it, just install it. It's pretty straightforward. Just follow the instructions like any other program. Install, just double click to open. Once you open the program, you will have this kind of window, and just drag and drop the reference images that you want to see. Let's do that actually. Let's go to Gemini Faces and let's bring these faces in. As you can see, this image is pretty big. You can zoom in and out by using the scroll wheel. Let's bring in the next set of faces. Actually, you can drag and drop multiple images at once, but I'm not going to do that now. Let's select a few hand images by holding down Control and bring all of them at once. As you can see here, it's like a collection. I brought all of these. You can select all of them and move them around. You can write some notes, right click and write a note. Call it whatever you want, for example, faces. Make it smaller, put it there, and write another note here. So the program is really easy to use, and by clicking right click you will see all the options. The first one is important. If you open the first one, you will have help and the most basic controls here. For example, you can drag with right click to move the whole window. You can double click with left button to maximize the image or zoom into the image. You can maximize the whole window by coming here, window, maximize. As you can see, it's Control F. It's like full screen, and you can double click on any image. To pan, to move around, just drag with the middle mouse button. Drag with right click to move the whole window. Move the images with left click and drag. You can right click, go to help, and go to keyboard shortcuts, and you will see all the shortcuts here. So this way, please explore the functionality of this program. It's pretty nice, and bring in all the images that you want to see. And then you can save this as one standalone file just by pressing Ctrl S. And here you go, a really nice tool for viewing reference images. So what other alternative ways do we have to view reference images? First of all, a second monitor can be a lot more convenient than switching windows in one computer. So you'll have a second monitor and view all your reference images there, and you work without any distraction. Or you can copy the reference images to a new device like your iPad or even smartphone and view the reference images there. It's also another option. So yeah, that's everything about collecting and using reference images. Now it's time for very quick questions. So these are the quick questions related to this lesson. The first question: what is a reference image and why is it important? So a reference image is an image which you look at and get an idea or understanding and you make something. It's really important because without reference images it's pretty hard to model real-life objects. The second question is very specific. How do you bring in images into PureRef? It's simple, you just drag and drop. You can also open or import images, but dragging and dropping is the simplest way. What are other alternative ways to view your reference images? So please copy your reference images onto your iPad or smartphone and view them, or you can have your second monitor set up and view the reference images there. So that was all for this lesson. See you in the next one. So this lesson is Introduction to Sculpting and Sculpting Tools in Blender. So what is sculpting, or digital sculpting in our case? Sculpting is just like in real life, creating some organic shapes using brushes. In real life you use clay for sculpting or whatever substance, I don't know, but in Blender you use 3D meshes and you use different types of brushes to sculpt the desired shape. I think you already knew what sculpting is. So let's go and take a look at the sculpting workspace and some sculpting tools in Blender. Here you have different workspaces for different purposes, and here you have sculpting. Once you are in sculpting workspace, immediately you notice a lot of things has changed. You are in sculpting mode, not object edit or other modes, you are in sculpting mode. You have your toolbar here, and you have your different brushes here, and you have your tool settings over here. The same settings can be found right on top of the viewport, and you can see your cursor has changed to indicate that you are using a brush. Actually, different brushes can have different colors, and you can see what brush you are using right here. If you don't see that, you should go to Tool Settings, not in Other tab. Go to Tool Settings, and you will see this. You shouldn't get overwhelmed by the number of options here by the Tool Settings. Actually, many of them are just repeated across the interface. For example, here you have tool settings vertically stacked, and you have the same things here horizontally stacked. It's just for convenience. You can use here or here, totally up to you. If you're comfortable using this horizontal menu, you can completely forget about this and use other things here. You find the same menu here too in tool settings, as you can see. Also, I'm not going to be using this horizontal brush drawer, so let's close that too. As you can see, we have cleaned up the interface a little, but these tools are really important, and when you switch tools, the settings, tool settings here will change, and they will change here too, if you noticed. Actually, the tool that we use the most often is this first tool. It is Sculpt Brush tool. And you have brush types right here. So currently I'm using the snake hook brush. Let's use something more simple like draw brush, which I use the most often. Actually, this is the default brush, and when you go to sculpting, you will see that draw brush is selected. And yeah, we can start sculpting right away. For example, let's create a shape out of this cube, right? And we hold down left mouse button and try to sculpt something. And when you try sculpting, you notice that not much is changing here. It seems like you're moving just individual vertices. And this brings us to a really important concept in sculpting. In order to sculpt something, we need very high poly count. I mean, we need a lot of geometry detail, a lot of polygons. We cannot sculpt with only a few faces. So how do we get those many polygons? Well, we can go back to Layout, go to Modifiers, and apply Subdivision Surface Modifier. Increase the levels a bunch, for example 8 levels. This is a lot of geometry. You can see it when you turn off Optimal Display. Yeah, as you can see, this is a lot of geometry now. Hover over the modifier and press Ctrl A to apply the modifier. And then let's go to Sculpting. Now, with the draw brush selected, you can try sculpting, and here it is. And here are the most important brush settings. The first is the radius. As you can see, your brush got really big. And strength, you can increase the strength or you can decrease the strength. And these two buttons, plus and minus, will determine whether you are adding volume or removing volume. For example, now I'm adding volume. If you press the minus button, you will remove volume. There is a shortcut for almost every operation, every tool in Blender, so there is no exception here. So the radius can easily be adjusted by pressing F, and the strength will be adjusted by pressing Shift F. By default, you add volume, like here you can see plus is turned on, but if you want to remove volume, you simply hold down Control. It's like inverting the effect of the brush. So that was everything for this lesson. Now it's time for quick questions. So the first question is, how do you start sculpting in Blender, and what do you need to be able to sculpt a shape? So in order to sculpt a shape, you need a 3D object, and you simply go to Sculpting Interface. Or in Object Mode, you can press Ctrl Tab and go to Sculpt Mode. To be able to sculpt something, you need high poly count. You can achieve this by adding Subdivision Surface Modifier. So the second question, where do you find the sculpt brushes? When you are in Sculpt Mode or Sculpting Workspace, you select the Sculpt brushes, and you can find brush types from here, or from here, or from here. Next question is, do you remember the shortcuts for brush settings? Well, to increase or decrease the brush size, press F. To change the strength of the brush, press Shift plus F. To invert the effect, just hold down Control. So that was everything for this lesson. I will see you in the next one. In this lesson, we're going to talk about a really important feature in Blender's sculpting toolset, which is dynamic topology. If you remember, in the last lesson, we applied Subdivision Surface Modifier in order to get higher detail on our mesh. Increase the levels like 8 and hit Ctrl A to apply. Go to Sculpting and start sculpting right away. And everything seems to be working very well. Until you get a different brush and you try to make big changes to your mesh. For example, let's take the snake hook, create a shape like this. Let's go. It's working not bad. Imagine you want to make a tree branch and you want to extrude some more from here. But now you start to see some problems here. Why do we have this terrible looking glitchy artifact? It's simply because Blender is taking the same topology, the same number of polygons, and trying to make that shape, and obviously these polygons are not enough to create that shape. And this is what dynamic topology is for. Let's undo these things and let's look for dynamic topology options in our tool settings. And here we can see we have dynamic topology. You can see the same thing here. So let's turn it on. We have some warnings because dynamic topology is sort of destructive. It will destroy some attributes like UVs and other attributes. So we agree, and we will now try to create that same shape. I think we need higher detail. Let's go ahead and decrease the detail. By default, you will have 12, but let's decrease it to maybe 2, which will be pretty hard for our computer, I think. No, it didn't struggle too much. And let's try to create that branch, and we don't have any problems like before. We can create more branches here, and Blender is dynamically creating new topology as we need. So dynamic topology, as the name suggests, dynamically create new topology, new geometry as we need. So we've just seen how to use dynamic topology, but what kind of options do we have with this feature? So I create a new object to talk about dynamic topology options here. The most important ones are the first, this number, detail size, and the detailing option. These two are really important, and we hardly ever touch the second option. So the first thing is detail size. If we increase this, we will have a lower poly brush. If we decrease this, make it smaller, we will have higher poly brush with smaller detail, smaller polygon size. By default it's 12, and let's take a look what size it is. Shift Z, you can see this is the size. And now let's decrease this number, for example, to 4, decrease the brush size to, and see what this does. As you can see, now we have higher poly brush, which we can use to create very fine details. So the second thing, this is also important, relative detail. Currently we're using relative detail, which means the detailing or the size of the polygons will be relative to the distance that we are from this object. For example, if we go closer, the detail will be even smaller, even finer. We will have even higher poly brush. Shift Z, as you can see, it's very, very fine. If you go even closer, we will have even finer detail, as you can see. You test it by going closer and further away, because relative detail means the detailing will be relative to the distance that we are from this object. The next detailing option that we always use is constant detailing. And as the name suggests, it's constant. It is not relative to the distance or anything. We will define this resolution number, and it will always have the same detail no matter how close or far away we are from this object. And if you remember, this can be a little confusing. In relative detail, we increase this number and we will have lower poly brush. Our brush is lower poly. If we decrease this number, our brush will be higher poly. But in constant detail, it's much more intuitive. If we increase this detail, we will increase the poly count. We will have higher poly. If we decrease it, we will have lower poly. And with constant detail, we have a really useful option here, which is detailed flood fill, which means if we click on this, the whole object will be in the same detail which we define here. For example, 20. So I haven't clicked on this. Now our model has very irregular details. Some parts have higher detail, some parts have lower detail, high poly, low poly, very mixed. And this is not very good practice, so we will normalize the detail and have the same detail everywhere by using this detail flood fill option. Let's go. And now our object has the same detail all around. And now we can talk about mirror options or symmetry options. You can see here we have mirror options. If we turn on, for example, x-axis symmetry, and now this is x plus, and now this is plus x direction, this is minus x direction when you press 1. When you press 3 on the numpad, you have y plus y direction and minus y direction. This is plus z minus z. So I think you know this basic coordinate system. Now let's turn on x-axis mirror or symmetry across x-axis, and let's test it. As you can see, whatever we do on this side will mirror on the other side across this x-axis. If we turn on y, I turned off x, this happens, and it's the same with z. If you go to this drop-down menu, we have a few other options, but we are interested in symmetrize option, which is really, really useful. Sometimes when you are sculpting, you forget to turn on symmetry and you create one side. For example, with snake hook, where's that? You create one side and you look at the other side and you realize that you forgot to turn on symmetry. Well, you don't have to worry about that. We can symmetrize it still. We have our shape on the plus x and we need to copy from plus to minus x. So let's go and symmetrize direction from minus to plus. We need the opposite from plus to minus and hit symmetrize. And you will have the perfectly symmetrical shape. So that was all in this lesson. Now it's time for quick questions. So here are the quick questions for today's lesson. The first question is, what is dynamic topology and what does it do? So dynamic topology creates topology or geometry dynamically where we need it. It gives us a lot of creative freedom and we don't have to worry about enough geometry when we need it. The second question, how do you increase and decrease the resolution in dynamic topology? Well, you can increase the resolution with this number, but it depends on which detailing option you're using. In constant detail, you increase this number for high poly and you decrease it for low poly. But in relative detail, it's the opposite. You decrease it for high poly, you increase it for low poly. The next question is, how do you symmetrize the sculpt? So you can easily symmetrize the sculpt by coming to symmetry options and choose the necessary direction, for example from -y to +y, and hit symmetrize. And you will have perfectly symmetrical sculpt. So that was everything for this lesson. I hope to see you in the next one. In this lesson, we're going to have a quick overview of sculpting tools in Blender. So for that, we need a nice object to sculpt to test our tools. Actually, you can select the object in object mode and press Ctrl and a number, like for example 4, to give 4 levels of subdivision surface modifier, or 4 levels in subdivision surface modifier. Click Ctrl A to apply. Let's go to sculpting and let's look at the tools that we have. And before we start, I'd like to clarify something. I'd like to make things quite simple here, minimal and beginner friendly, so that you can follow easily. It means that I'm not going to go into details of each of these tools with all these options, buttons and sliders that we have. But if you are curious and you want to learn absolutely all the tools with all the options and buttons and sliders, you can let me know. You can directly message me or leave a comment, write in Q&A sections. And if there is enough interest, I will happily add the necessary lessons as a bonus to this course. So with that being said, let's quickly go over the tools that we have here. So let's go. The first one is Sculpt Brush tool. As I said, we will be using this one the most often. I don't know, maybe 99% of the time we will be using the Sculpt brush and the brush that we have here. So we will start with the next tool, which is Paint tool. If you select this Paint tool, you will have some colors and you can paint those colors. And this is called vertex painting. We're painting vertex colors. If you're familiar with vertex colors, that's what we are doing here now. You can actually flip these two colors by pressing X. And you can change this to any color that you like. And this color information will be added to the vertex data. And this can be a good way to kind of give a draft color, preview color to your characters after you have finished sculpting. But before sculpting, we don't need that. If you want to remove this, you can come here to Object Data Properties, Color Attributes, and remove from here. But if you want to keep this color and just hide it from the viewport, you can come here to Viewport Shading Options and change the object color to Material. The next tool is Mask tool, which can be very interesting and very useful. Mask is just a mask. It does what it says. It masks some parts of the geometry so that we can't do something there. For example, we can't sculpt on the masked area. And we have a whole menu of mask options here. For example, you can invert the mask. Now the masked area is open, and then that we can sculpt there, but we cannot sculpt anywhere else. You can clear the mask here, you can fill with mask. So it's a very useful tool, which we might use in this course. The next tool is Face Set tool. We are not going to be using that one. You simply give colors to different parts of your object. By each stroke, you give a different color. One thing that I can show you as an example is here, auto masking options. You can mask by face sets, and when you sculpt on a face set, you are limited there and you cannot go out of this masked area. You will sculpt only there. Of course, if you start from a different area, you can sculpt there, but if you start on the face set, you will be limited there. That's one thing that face sets can be useful. The next tool is also a mask tool, but with a few options. If you click on this, the default one is box mask. You can mask areas by drawing a box. If you hold the left mouse button here, you will have different mask tools, for example, lasso mask and other tools. The next tool can also be useful. It's hide tool. You can box hide parts of your mesh. You can lasso hide, or you can hide with a line. I'm not deleting anything, I'm just hiding it. If you want to unhide, just Alt H. And if you want to clear the mask, just press Alt M. The next one is Face Set tools, and we are not going to go over that. The next one is Box Trim. This one is a useful thing. Let's activate it actually. Click on that to activate. With this tool, we can cut off areas of a mesh, as you can see here. And by default, it gives a face set color. As I said, you can come here and face set from visible, to get rid of that. And let's turn this off. We have other options here. Lasso trim, for example, you can trim the areas of your mesh by lasso drawing. The next tool is a line project. This is also a kind of interesting tool. With this, we are not deleting geometry, or we are not cutting. We are just squishing it and kind of flattening it out. So the next three tools are filter tools or simulation tools. The first one is mesh filter. And the way it works is you select a filter from here and you drag from left to right to apply that filter. For example, I selected the sphere and I will drag from left to right and apply the sphere filter. So these can be useful in certain situations, but for a character development, I think we are not going to use them. So please play with them, test them out, see what they do. And the cloth filter is also an interesting one. You again apply some filters from here and you treat this object like a cloth. For example, again, you drag from left to right and apply this filter. These can easily go out of control, so you need to be very gentle. The next one is color filter. You need a vertex color for that. Let's come here and change it to attribute. Again, you drag from left to right to, for example, apply the filter that you select from here. We change hue, we change saturation. We can change other things, for example, contrast. So that was all that I wanted to show you in this video. Now it's time for quick questions. So what are tools and brushes? What is the difference between them? So by tools, we mean these tools in the sculpting mode or sculpting workspace, and brushes or brush assets are here. And an interesting thing, you can create or add your own brush assets. So the next question is, what does the paint tool do and how do we hide or remove the color? So with paint tool, we paint vertex colors. If you don't know what vertex color is, it is color information attached to each vertex. You can find vertex color attributes right here in the object data properties. You can add or remove them from here, and you can hide them from viewport shading options and changing the object color. So the next more specific question is, how do you hide or unhide parts of the mesh? So to hide parts of the mesh, you can use hide tools from here. You can use lasso hide. You can use box hide, and to unhide you simply press Alt H. So that was everything for this lesson. I will see you in the next one. So in this lesson we will learn about the most commonly used and really important sculpting brushes that we need to know in this course. First of all, we will talk about the brushes that we use the most often in this course, and then we will talk about some other interesting brushes. So the brush I personally use the most often is this default draw brush. When you open Sculpting Workspace, Sculpting Mode, draw brush is usually selected by default. And this is the brush that I use the most often. It has a nice smooth effect like this, which is universal. This round fall off is convenient in many situations, so I use the most often personally. Maybe some people prefer to use other brushes for building or growing different shapes, but I prefer to use the default draw brush. The next brush we might use a lot is this clay brush. It also has similar effect and similar fall off. It is good for building, for example, characters' muscles. So the next brush we will use a lot from the first line is this crease brush. It's also used a lot to kind of create the crease effects, kind of create wrinkles on the body or on other objects. So the next brush that we use a lot is this inflate brush. It can inflate something or deflate. Let me give an example with a different shape. For example, we have this shape, and if you think this tail shaped thing is too thin, you can inflate it. Use the inflate brush and we can inflate and make it bolder and larger. You can hold down Control to invert the effect, and you can slim it down by deflating it with the same brush. It's a very useful brush and we will use it in this course. Now we will move to the second row, and there is one brush that we use 100% of the time, almost at the same amount as the draw brush, which is this smooth brush, because it has very nice smoothing effect. It doesn't change the amount of polygons, but it smooths any effect. For example, if we create some harder shapes with this crease brush, for example, we can use smooth brush to polish it, to make it smoother, just like this. So because this brush is so commonly used, there is a way to activate it without explicitly selecting it from here. For example, I'm using clay brush and I'm sculpting some shapes, right? I can simply activate the smooth brush by holding down Shift. So hold down Shift to activate this smooth brush. So the next brush that's also used very often is this grab brush, grab tool. Press F to increase. This is very important for creating very general, subtle changes to the overall shape of the object. You can change, for example, overall shape of the head of the character, or you can move things around. So grab brush is very important. And on the second row we have another brush which is more recent addition. It is this pose brush. Although we don't use it a lot, it's really powerful and sometimes it's very useful. So let me create a shape with snake hook. You can see that we are already using snake hook a lot, so it's also a very important brush. So this is the shape, for example, and let's take this pose brush to kind of change the pose of the shape. Let's imagine this is an arm or neck or whatever. We can increase the size of the brush. This white line indicates where the rotations happen. So let's come closer, and just like this, we can pose and change the pose of the overall shape. And you can hold down Shift to kind of smooth things out by activating the smooth brush. So pose brush, very powerful and used a lot. So the next brush on the next row is this elastic hook. We already used a lot, and you already know that we will use this in this course. So we have looked at the brushes that we will be using in this course. Now we can take a look at some other interesting options that we have here. So the first brush that you might be interested in and you might use in this course is this clay strips. This is the effect. It's like clay, but it has sharper effect. Another interesting brush can be this crease sharp. We have seen crease brush. Crease sharp is the same, but with stronger effect. If you need stronger effect, you use this crease sharp instead of crease. We have seen draw brush, which is universal, but we also have draw sharp, which by default removes volume, as you can see here. This can also be a useful brush, and maybe we will use it in this course. So it's also a nice brush which has a very strong effect. You can hold down Control to invert the effect like that. On the second line, we have a really interesting brush and very useful one, not necessarily for sculpting characters, but it's used a lot in other projects. It's Scrape Fill. So when you sculpt shapes like these, like for example stylized stones, etc., this will come very handy, and it's a very common tool used to create these stylized effects, shapes. So yeah, it's a very nice tool. Scrape Fill, remember, it's the most common tool for flattening things out, and it's written here. And I find this Grab Silhouette also a powerful brush. It's similar to Grab tool, but it kind of exaggerates the effect while grabbing, as you can see here. You can use it to, for example, create mountains, grow some shapes like that. And with this smooth brush, you can smooth the effect a little. So these were all the brushes that I wanted to kind of demonstrate in this lesson, and I will leave others for you to explore, to play with, and find maybe something that you like. And all these brushes have very similar settings over here, or you can find them from here too, with some unique options for some brushes. So while we are developing our character, if we need to change anything from here, I will definitely explain that in more detail. Now it's time for quick questions. The first question is more general, but easy to answer. Which brushes are we going to use the most in this course? As I showed you, we're going to use Draw Brush, Clay Brush, Crease, Inflate, Grab, Smooth, Pose, and the Snake Hook, and probably some other brushes if we really need them. How to temporarily activate the Smooth brush? Well, it's easy. You simply hold down Shift while sculpting. Which brush do we use for making general changes? It's also a very general question, but to make big changes, we usually use the Grab brush. So that was all for this lesson. See you in the next one. So in this lesson, we are going to create the block out of the character, but first we will talk a little about basic human body proportions. I mean general proportions of the adult human body. And an interesting way to measure human body proportions is by head unit or head length. One head unit, as you can see, is from the tip of the chin to the top of the head. This is one head length, and an average adult male human body height is about 7.5 heads tall, or 7.5 head units tall. And as you can see, from the tip of the chin to the nipples, it's one head unit, and from the nipples to the navel, it's another head unit or head length. And the legs are usually 3.5 head units, as you can see from this image. And the arms are usually 3 head lengths, or you can measure it like this: from the top of the shoulder to the elbows is equal to the elbows to the knuckles. These distances are equal. You also need to know that these measurements are very general, kind of standard, and the measurements vary greatly depending on the gender, age, and even race. So these are very general and standard measurements. Okay, and you know what? We don't need that information. We don't need those measurements because we are creating a stylized character and we have more freedom in terms of measurements, in terms of body proportions, I mean. And from this image, you can see stylized bodies can have very different proportions, not very realistic. It's very exaggerated, but our character will have a bit more realistic body. But these characters are extremely stylized and cartoony. Ours will be a bit more like a real character. So yeah, we will need that information. Also, you need to know a little about body proportions because you might want to develop more realistic characters in the future, even though we're making a stylized character in this course. Now it's time to think about how to develop the base shape of the body. And there are different ways to create the base block out. One is to simply go to edit mode and try to model. For example, you can use mirror modifier to create the overall shape. I mean, you can use modeling tools to create the basic shape. It's also one of the ways to develop the basic shape of the body, basic block out of the body. You develop the block out, you make it look more like a human character, and then you go to sculpting, turn on dynamic topology, and continue from there. Another way, the second way of creating the block out is simply start from sculpting. You take any primitive mesh and you start sculpting and create the basic shape from there. For example, you can simply apply the subdivision surface modifier, go to sculpting, press 1, turn on x-axis mirror and dynamic topology. You use a necessary brush like snake hook and you start developing the different parts of your character. You can decrease the number to increase the resolution and start from there. You use the inflate brush to inflate the legs. These are going to be the legs. You use the grab brush to grab the legs closer to each other, to move the legs closer to each other. And you develop the rest of the body. You create the arms. I mean, this doesn't look too bad, right? You can do it like this. Actually, it's entirely possible and very creative. And there is this third and final way of creating the block out. It's using simple primitive shapes for different parts of your character, and you will join these different parts and finalize your character. Only we will keep things very simple. We are not going to have very detailed parts. And here we will use the mirror modifier. Let's go and take UV sphere, go to edit mode, bring it here as Shift Z, put it about here, give it a mirror modifier. And we also need to think about the scale. So our character will be about 1.6 to 1.7 meters. So let's actually measure. I think this is 1 meter and this will be 1.7. We will have 1.6, around 1.6, just like this. I think I removed the mirror modifier. Let's add it back, GX. For the hat, we will use another UV sphere. I went out of edit mode. In object mode, let's add another UV sphere, go to edit mode, make it way smaller, GZ. This is the top of the head, S, Shift Z, just like this. Shift D, Z, this will be the body, S, Shift Z, S to scale up. Let's go to edit mode, put them about here, make them a little smaller, Shift D, Z. Let's go to edit mode, Shift D, R90. Remember, I am looking from the front view by pressing 1, make it a little smaller, go to edit mode, Shift D, R90, Shift D, make it smaller, and Shift D for the final part of the arm from the side view by pressing 3, S, Y. And for the legs, I can select this, Control L, from side view, Shift D, R90, S, Y, GX a little, neck, Control L, Shift D, Z, we make it smaller. And now we need to correct the proportions a little. For that, we can bring in a reference image. For example, we can bring in this image and make the proportions a little similar to this. You just drag and drop while looking from the front view by pressing 1, right? So let's put it here, make it smaller, Shift Z, and put it about here. I just want to know the proportions. I just want to I think we need to bring this belly or torso up a little. Select one, Control L, G, Z, and let's make the arms much smaller. Control L, S to scale down, put it right up here. Select these two, Control L, scale them down just a bit. Now we have very basic block out of the character's body, and in the next lesson we're going to refine it, make it look a bit more beautiful than this. So now it's time for quick questions. Please, after each question, pause the video and take your time to think about it before hearing the answer. So here we go. The first question: what is a simple way to measure human body proportions? Well, it was quite interesting. It is a head unit, and one human height, average adult body height, is 7.5 head units or head lengths. And one head length was from the tip of the chin to the top of the skull, top of the head. The next question: what are different ways to block out the base body shape? Well, I showed you three ways. The first way is just poly modeling it. In edit mode, using modeling tools, you can create the base shape and then continue in sculpting. The second was quite simple. You just take one primitive shape, go to sculpting, use dynamic topology and different tools to create the basic shape. And the last one was using primitive shapes for different parts of the body, which we did. So the next question: how do you bring in reference images into Blender's viewport? There are a few ways to bring in reference images, but a simple way is to drag and drop the image right into the viewport. But for that, it's better to be looking from the front view by pressing 1, and you open the folder in a separate window and you bring in the reference image. Then you can rotate, scale, just like any other object in the viewport. So that was all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. In this lesson, we are going to refine this shape and make it look more like a body. And also we will merge different parts and make a single object. Before we refine this object, I think we need to make a few changes. Or rather, we need to add some more details. Let's go and take a UV sphere with less detail. Make it smaller. RX90. Way smaller. This will be for the chest. Please make the transformations in edit mode, not in object mode. With that, it's easier for the modifiers to work. Let's add mirror modifier. Not bad, I think. And we will use the same object to create the butts right there. It's looking a little funny now, but we're going to make it look more beautiful. Before we make changes or refine it in sculpt mode, we need to follow some general rules. The first one is to take a backup file. We need to copy this entire blend file, entire project, and save one file as a backup. So on Windows, it's easy. You just select the file, you press Ctrl C and then Ctrl V, and you can rename it to whatever you want. And the next thing we're going to do is to apply this mirror modifier on the mirrored objects. I think we only have two mirrored objects, so let's come here, Ctrl A, select this one, come here, Ctrl A, and make sure that you don't have any other objects with any modifiers. Once you have done that, we need to apply the transformations because we might have scaled objects in object mode. That's why it's a really good habit to apply transformations. So select all objects, press Ctrl A. You might need to apply the scale to fix a lot of problems in Blender. But here we are going to apply all transformations. You can check it by selecting an object and come here to object properties and make sure these numbers are 0, 1. So these are the default numbers. And one more thing you can do, and I think it's an important one, you can change the shading option on the objects. You can select the object and smooth shade them. apply smooth shading on the objects. It will look nicer this way. And now we can go to sculpting. Actually, I have changed another thing. If you have noticed, you can come here, viewport shading options, and you can change the matte cap to your liking. And now we can start sculpting. I'd like to see which object is active. Let's activate this object, go to sculpting, and let's see if you can sculpt. Yeah. One thing that you really shouldn't forget is to turn on symmetry, but don't turn on dynamic topology just yet. And then you can start sculpting. You can use draw brush or whatever brush that you like, and you should probably bring down the strength a little, and we can start sculpting, making changes. So here I press Control and try to make her much slimmer. Let's bring up the strength. By default, we can only sculpt one object. For example, if I want to sculpt the chest now, the breasts I can't because I need to switch objects. One way is to go to Layout, the object mode, and switch to the next object and go back to sculpting and start. But now we have a better option. In sculpting, we simply press Alt Q, hover over a necessary object that you like, and press Alt Q to switch, and there is a nice highlight that shows you have switched the object that you're sculpting, as you can see. I forgot to turn on symmetry. If you forget, you can turn on, and also you can symmetrize from -X to plus. Let's symmetrize, and now they're the same, and keep this on. So that's fine for now, I think. Let's change these butts. And as you can see, it's joined now because I use symmetrize. So let's make them smaller. I think we need to decrease the strength of the smooth brush. Let's go to smooth brush and decrease this strength. It's too much. Let's go back to draw brush. Let's actually switch objects with Alt Q. I really recommend looking at reference images at this point. That will help greatly. I think we need to rotate the body or lean the body a little backwards. We still have this reference image. Let's look at that. As you can see here, the character should pose a little more straight up and look a bit more confident like this. So actually we can duplicate this reference image, Shift D, RZ90, to see from the side view, GY. We need to bend the arms and the leg a little, just a little. And we can actually do that in object mode too. Let's go to edit mode, select this, Control L, LL, GY to move it back, just like that. I think that's better. And we will move the arm too. Select the arm, L, GY, like that. That's better. And the middle also, select a few vertices from both parts and activate this proportional editing, make it smaller and bend it like this. We can select these and rotate a little, GY, move a little, look from the side view, and the legs too. Let's go to edit mode, Shift Z, select these, or maybe this part, GY, just like that. And this part, GY, just like that. Yeah, I think that's looking a bit nicer now. Back to sculpting, make her even slimmer. So let's switch to the legs by pressing Alt Q while you're hovering over the legs. And I can see that we haven't turned on X-axis mirror for this object. Let's take the grab brush by pressing G and move these areas around. Let's switch to draw brush by pressing V, hold down Shift to smooth things out, hold down Control to invert the effect. V for draw brush. Let's press F to decrease the brush size. And as you can see, the symmetry is not working very well. Maybe because we moved this arm, but we forgot to turn on the symmetry when we moved it. We can symmetrize from plus X to minus, and we have the same shape on the other side. I think that's enough for the refinements. Now, finally, we can merge different parts of the object. Let's go to object mode. We will do that using Boolean modifier. And before we merge, we need to do one thing. We need to separate all these parts into their own different objects. For that, let's select everything, go to edit mode and select everything with A, press P and select by loose parts. This way, all these objects are separate now, and now we will merge them back. So let's go start from any of the object here. Let's select, for example, this central object, go to modifiers, add Boolean modifier. So let's select the target object. But here's an important thing. We need to choose union, not difference or other things. We need to choose union and press Ctrl A to apply. Of course, we could have done this in a different way, but doing it one by one is safer. So this will duplicate one of the objects. We need to delete that. Let's delete it and select this object, Boolean, and we can copy the modifiers by selecting different objects, any object that you want, and select the object with the modifier the last. This will be active selection, and press Ctrl L and copy modifiers. Now let's select the target object. Let's choose union and apply. One object is duplicated. It is this one. Let's delete it. This object, let's select that, union, apply, delete this duplicate, select this object, main object, union, Ctrl A, and this, delete this duplicate. So now we have finished merging all the different parts, but I intentionally left the hand and the head because we sculpt them separately. So that's all. We have refined and merged different parts of the object. Now it's time for quick questions. So as always, please pause the video after each question to take some time to think about it and answer it yourself before you hear the answer. The first question, do you remember any shortcuts for any brushes? I hope you do. You remember some shortcuts. For example, for draw brush it was V, for snake hook it was K, for grab it was G, for inflate deflate it was I. There is a very short video about brush shortcuts. Please watch that. Next question, how did we separate all parts of the mesh into separate objects? If you have one object which has separate parts, separate meshes, and if they are not connected to each other, you can separate each part into their own objects by selecting everything and pressing P, and you choose by loose parts to separate all parts into their own objects. So the last question, what modifier did we use for merging objects? So it's pretty easy. We used Boolean modifier and union option. So this video was quite long and we have learned so much, so please come back to this video from time to time if you forget something. And that was all for this video. I hope to see you in the next one. So this is a quick guide to sculpting the body. In this lesson, we're not going to sculpt the entire body. I'm going to show you very prominent features, which if you apply, will quickly shape the character's body. If you know these features and if you create those shapes, the character body will quickly resemble the more realistic human body. So now let's get to work so that you can understand what I mean. Here we have pretty much finished body. This will be for testing. And remember, again, I'm not going to create the entire sculpt in this video. It's just a quick guide. Let's go. First of all, Shift B to come closer. Let's actually change the placement to surface so that we can draw on the surface of the body. So the first very obvious feature is these bones, as you can see, and these hollow areas, as you can see. These are very prominent features, and if you make them, your character will immediately look like a more realistic humanoid character. So let's take our draw brush and let's test it. Alt Q to switch to this object if we haven't already. Let's turn on dynamic topology. Remember, this is our test object. First of all, let's test the dynamic topology detail. Wow, we have very nice detail. Imagine you have the shoulders, right, about here. We will be quick and rough here. We're not going to be too careful. So these are very prominent features and make your character look like a more realistic character immediately. And you have these muscles coming from the neck, and you have the small hollow area here and also here too, just like that. You can bring them down a little, press G for grab brush. So these are very important. That was the first thing that I wanted to share. Another thing is this area. This area is a little hollow. Let's change to draw brush by pressing V. Hold down Shift for smoothing things out. Again, I'm just creating a very rough sketch. Move the shoulders a little closer to each other because this is a female character and the shoulders shouldn't be too wide. So if you create a small hollow area here, it will immediately change the overall shape and make your character look a bit better. S to smooth brush, and let's increase the strength actually. So yeah, this area, a little hollow area, will make a big difference. I mean, they look better. So regarding this area, let's come here. With a few touches, you retopologize it, and by holding down Shift, you smooth things out real quick. So here you can do something like this. Let's come here. Let's take the Annotate tool. You pay attention to these prominent areas and these creases. It continues over here, and you can apply a few strokes over here to create those 6 packs. So let me quickly demonstrate that here. Press V. So just like that, you can apply a few strokes here. Smooth things out by holding down Shift. For some reason, my dynamic topology is turned off. Let's actually change it to constant detail, and let's test it. Test the detail. I think it's too fine. Let's go down to 200, and let's detail flood fill so that all parts of the mesh is the same detail. So just like that. And you have small areas here and a little line over here. You can notice that if you look at the reference images over here. So these are the 6 packs, and these are the shapes that I just sculpted, the lines. You can take a look at the skeleton too. So muscles are usually coming from here to this direction, and here we have the knee. And an interesting and quick guide over here, you can sculpt horizontal lines like this and 2 vertical lines over here. For that, you need to take the crease brush and just draw 2 lines like this. And the leg immediately starts to look better. The knee is not always the same. It can be slightly different from human to human actually. You have a little freedom there. But a really nice tip here about the leg, you actually have these 2 lines here. So let me take the Annotate brush, 2 lines over here. It is not very straight, and the lines are like this. The inner bump, as you can see, is more prominent but shorter. The outer bump is less prominent but longer. So this is the key, and this is about the back of the leg actually, not the front. The front is usually not very straight but a little bent, just like that. So let's delete these notes. So I think you got the idea. You need to have more prominent area over here and less prominent here. These are because of the muscles, of course. You can take a look at the reference images as always. And when you look from the side view, they need to be more prominent, more visible, not very flat. Of course, we need to slim the leg even more. And regarding the bumps over here, usually the outer bump is lower here and the inner bump is a little higher. If you look from the front, you can see that the outer bump is usually lower in position and the inner bump is a bit higher because of the bones that we have. The leg is a little too big here. And don't forget about this area. In order to make it look better immediately, you can draw a line over here, just like that. Let's go to the arms. You actually have the 2 lines here coming from 2 different angles, and also this shape, it goes over here, coming from here, and 2 lines here, a small line here, and 2 lines over here, and a bumpy bone here, and the connected muscle. You can quickly create the arm shape. Sculpt a nice shape starting from here and starting from here and coming just this direction. Let's use inflate brush by pressing I to inflate these areas a little. So you have these 2 lines where the muscle stops. You have this hollow area. Regarding the elbow, you need that bumpy bone and the connected muscle lines about here to make it look a bit more realistic. Also, this area of the arm is not very straight. Usually we have this sloping shape like that. So we need to have that shape too. It's because of the muscles or the tissue which goes down a little because of the mass. Of course, this is not very visible if the character is too slim. You don't have to do that. Just like in real life, if a person is very slim, they don't have that on the back of their arms. And a few other things regarding the proportions. The legs are not usually very far away from each other. They are usually closer to each other. And these are a little closer to each other, as you can see. We can make them closer. And regarding the length of the arm, when you put your arm straight down, the tip of the fingers should be about here, about the middle of the thigh. So let's take the pose brush and let's rotate the arms and put them over here. At the hands, they will be a bit too long. So Ctrl Z, we can take the grab brush and make the arm a little shorter. So yeah, I think this is the correct length. These are the important features on the character's body, and if you know them and if you apply these shapes, your character will start to look a bit more realistic much quickly. So once again, I strongly suggest looking at reference images as much as you can, along with learning these small techniques. This will help you quickly create the basic shape of the character. So I hope you will find these tips very useful. So now it's time for a small challenge, and it's a really important exercise. Please, by looking at the reference images and using the techniques that you learned in this lesson, quickly create the basic body shape of the character. Once you have done that, take a screenshot of the character body and share on our Discord community server. You can search for Pixelmorph Learning on Discord, or you can use the link in the resources section of the last video of this course. And I hope to see you in the next lesson. Before we start the lesson, I'd like to tell you something important, that sculpting is a very slow process. Just like painting, it takes some time before you get it right, but don't get discouraged. This happens with everyone. So just keep practicing. With enough practice, you will get much better results in no time. And another thing, this video is quite long because of sculpting parts that we do. There are parts where I just sculpt without talking, which makes things a little boring. So instead of simply watching, think about how you would do it with your own character. Or if you want to challenge yourself, you can even sculpt along. But if you decide to watch those parts and you think it's very slow, you can always increase the speed of the video in the video player settings, and you can also mute the background music. So with that being said, let's get started. So in this lesson, we're going to sculpt the body, and we will be sculpting the hands and the head later. Before we start sculpting, we need to prepare the mesh and make sure there are no problems left with it. First of all, let's check for any flip normals on the objects. For that, you can come here to Viewport Overlays menu and turn on Face Orientation. Any red faces mean that the normals are flipped here. The way to flip it back is here. You can come to Mesh, Normals, and Flip. Or you can also press Alt-N to bring up Normals menu and flip. Another thing that we really need to do is to select all objects and reset the transformations or apply the transformations. This will definitely prevent from lots of problems later on. It's not only important in sculpting in any project in Blender. From time to time you need to go to object mode and apply some transformations of objects. For that you can come here to Object, Apply, and All Transformations. You can also do that by pressing Ctrl A and apply all transformations. You can check if they are applied by selecting any object and come here to Object Properties and check these numbers. These should be default numbers like zeros for location and rotation and 1 for scale. And the last thing we really need to do is to find and delete any overlapping vertices. For that, we will select all these objects, go to Edit Mode, press A to select everything, and press M to merge any overlapping vertices by distance. This means any vertices which are very close or on top of each other will get merged. And as you can see, we have merged 40 vertices which were overlapping. Also, one more important thing, you need to go to wireframe view by pressing Shift Z and see if there are any objects inside our mesh. You can also check that by going inside like that and look for any mesh. I think this mesh is extra here. You can see it from here too. Let's delete that one. Look especially at the joints, there shouldn't be any problems left there. So I think everything is fine now. So once we have done that, we can duplicate this object and keep it as a backup file. I have already done that. Please go to the folder where you are saving this blend file and duplicate it, name it whatever you want, and come back and start sculpting. Let's go to sculpting now. And don't forget to prepare your reference images, open them in PureRef or any other alternative method that we talked about. You can open it on your second monitor or on your smartphone. I will be using PureRef on my second monitor. Before that, let me show you what images I have there. So this is PureRef, and let's go see. We talked about this, how to bring in images into PureRef and how to set it up as we like. So please do that if you haven't done, because we will look at reference a lot in this lesson. We will turn on dynamic topology. I can give you one really good advice from the beginning. If you're just starting out, if you're a beginner in sculpting, you need to bring down the strength of the brush that you're using. This way you don't make sudden extreme changes and you don't get frustrated later. So please bring down the strength for many brushes that you're using. For example, smooth brush is too strong. I always bring the strength down. And also, as I have mentioned before, you can select the matte cap that you like. And now let's use dynamic topology with constant detail, and let's do detail flood fill on this object. Let's check, for example, 20 and detail flood fill. 20 is too big, I think, for this. Control Z. Let's change it to 120 and see how it looks. And I think this detail is pretty good, and we can keep it in constant detail. Remember, I decreased the strength of the brushes a lot, and I recommend doing that to you too. Some people start from the face when they are sculpting a character, but the face is the most important and the most interesting part. So if we do the most interesting part in the beginning, there won't be any other interesting parts. So I always keep it for the last step. And at this point, please look at the reference images a lot. I think we need to bring the two legs a little closer to each other. For that we need to get grab brush by pressing G, F to scale up just a little. Yeah, I think this is looking better now. Press V for the draw brush. I wasn't planning to sculpt the feet because we will create shoes anyway, but let's do that once we have started. We are not going to make very detailed sculpt anyways. I think we need to inflate the arms a little. Press I to inflate. Not too much, just a little. So that's all for this video. Now it's time for quick questions. Again, please pause the video after each question, think about it, and try to answer yourself. The first question, how do we reset the object transformations, for example, scale? Well, we go to object mode, select the objects, one or many objects, and press Ctrl A. And from the menu, you can choose whatever you want, for example, all transformations or scale, rotation, etc. The next question, how do we check for overlapping vertices of the mesh and fix if there is any? Well, we select the object, go to edit mode, select everything and press M for merge and choose by distance. This question is very general. What are the important things to know when sculpting? Well, there are a lot of things to know, but in this lesson I asked you to decrease the strength of the brushes that you use. This way you will work more incrementally in smaller steps and you don't make big, extreme, sudden changes. So that was all for this lesson. I hope to see you in the next one.